Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are exploring something that can be an incredibly frustrating plateau for language learners.
Oh, absolutely.
Have you ever wondered why you can memorize, 1,000 vocabulary words, master perfect grammar, and still sound completely robotic when you try to order a cup of coffee? Or just chat with a colleague?
Yeah, it is a very common wall to hit. You clearly know the language, but the language just doesn't quite sound like you.
Exactly. So today we are looking at the mechanics of everyday English, specifically focusing on how we describe daily routines and transitions.
Which sounds like a fairly simple topic, honestly. But it is actually the ultimate stress test for your language skills.
How so?
Well, describing your day-to-day life forces you to explain the mundane, chaotic reality of human existence. You can't hide behind academic terminology.
That is a great point. And it brings us to a really profound intellectual tension regarding how we actually achieve that natural native-like fluency.
Right. What is the primary engine driving your speech when you want to sound human?
Well, I argue that natural fluency is fundamentally built on structural precision. It is about mastering tense shifts to accurately reflect reality. You also have to use connective word glue to build logical, coherent sequences that your listener can actually follow.
And I take a completely different view of this process. I argue that true native-like fluency, and specifically the warmth we associate with human communication, relies primarily on adopting versatile macro phrases.
Macro phrases.
Yeah, those colloquial idioms and phrasal verbs, they allow you to bypass those complex, tedious grammatical lists altogether.
Okay, well, let's unpack that, because I think we really have to start with the foundation of clarity itself. And, clarity lies entirely in grammar and sequence.
I figure you would start there.
I have to. Think about the transition from generalized habits to specific events. If I say to you, I wake up and stretch, using the present tense, I am establishing a universal baseline of my behavior.
Right. You are painting a static portrait of your life.
Exactly. But the moment I need to convey a specific reality, say a chaotic morning that actually happened today, I have to structurally pivot. I have to shift from the general drink to the specific drank.
I agree that the tense shift provides a timestamp. It tells the listener, hey, we are looking at a specific Tuesday now. But let's be honest about what actually paints the picture here.
What do you mean?
The verb tense is what anchors the picture. It anchors it, sure. The past tense of drink is merely functional, though. The vividness of that chaotic morning doesn't come from the verb conjugation. It comes entirely from the descriptive phrasing.
But if I don't use the past tense, you don't even know when this is happening.
True. But think about the reality of a rushed morning. What actually transmits that feeling of chaos to the listener? It is the phrase, gulping it down while tying my shoes. Right? That image, the kinetic energy of consuming fuel simultaneously with the physical act of preparing to run out the door. That is what accurately conveys the experience. That phrasing trumps the structural shift every single time.
Well, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. That descriptive imagery of gulping it down relies entirely on the listener already understanding the structural boundaries of the story.
I don't know if I agree with entirely.
I mean it. If my underlying temporal structure is flawed, if I am mixing up my present and past tenses, the imagery becomes a confusing mess. The listener's brain is working so hard to figure out when this is happening that they cannot appreciate the vivid image you are trying to paint.
But you are assuming that grammar is the only way we signal a shift in reality. Think about the colloquial phrase, getting the job done.
Okay.
If someone says, my morning wasn't glamorous, but it got the job done, that phrasing communicates a pragmatic desperation. No perfectly executed verb conjugation can capture that specific human nuance. The nuance lives in the phrases, not the tenses.
Okay, let's step beyond just a single sentence then. Let's look at how we connect those thoughts, because this is where the structural engineering becomes absolutely non-negotiable.
All right, let's hear it.
Imagine someone recounting their morning without any connective tissue. It sounds like this. I woke up, I made coffee, I left.
Right, yeah. The classic robot voice?
Exactly. It is mechanical, it is jarring. To cure this, we prescribe word glue. We use words like First, then, and after that.
The standard transition words.
Yes, because sequentially connecting the dots is the only way to make a narrative flow smoothly. First, I woke up late, then I made a quick coffee, and after that, I left. The listener requires those temporal markers
To do what exactly?
to map out the progression of events in their own mind. Without the glue, your narrative collapses into an unstructured list of data points.
That is a compelling argument, but have you considered that macro phrases eliminate the need for endless sequencing in the first place?
Eliminate the sequencing? How?
Well, you are arguing for a better way to connect a long, tedious list of items. I am arguing that the truly fluent speaker simply discards the list entirely.
Discards the list? But those are the facts of the morning. How do you convey the facts without listing them?
By using linguistic economy, let's take the macro phrase getting ready.
Okay.
If you rely purely on sequencing and your favorite word glue, you are forcing yourself and your listener into an exhausting recitation. Listen to how heavy this is. First, I brushed my teeth, then I washed my face. After that, I changed my clothes, then I packed my bag.
I mean, that is structurally perfect, though.
It is structurally perfect, yes, but it is conversationally fatal. Even with your word glue, that is an overwhelming amount of microdata.
I wouldn't call it overwhelming.
It is for a casual chat. The macro phrase getting ready for work simplifies the communication. It absorbs 10 tiny, tedious details into one elegant, universally understood concept. You don't achieve native-like speech by perfectly linking a dozen microscopic actions with transition words. You achieve it by knowing how to encapsulate those actions.
But doesn't that inherently sacrifice detail?
It sacrifices unnecessary detail. The glue you love so much is only necessary if you are determined to give a micro-level account of your morning. And frankly, most conversational partners do not want or need that.
I think that depends on the context.
True fluency is knowing how to summarize. It is about reducing the cognitive load for both the speaker and the listener.
Well, I am not convinced by that line of reasoning, mainly because it assumes that precision is somehow at odds with economy.
Sometimes it is.
In fact, linguistic precision is exactly what ensures universally understood communication. And this becomes especially critical when we transition from the domestic sphere, like talking about our morning routines, into the professional sphere.
Wait, how does the professional sphere change the mechanics?
The stakes for misunderstanding are simply higher. In a workplace context, the terminology needs to be structurally clean. Think about the word commute.
Okay, the journey to work.
Right. We use commute instead of driving to work. Or we use the term coworkers instead of a vague, chatty phrase like my office friends.
But office friends is perfectly understandable.
Understandable, perhaps, but it blurs a critical sociological boundary. Coworkers is precise. It creates a clean professional boundary in the listener's mind.
A bit rigid, don't you think?
It is necessary. It distinguishes the people you share an office with from the people you might invite to a weekend barbecue. Similarly, commute distinguishes the specific routine travel between home and a workplace from any other type of transit.
I suppose that is true.
By mastering these precise, formal definitions, a speaker ensures their narrative is structurally sound and professionally appropriate. Formal clarity prevents misinterpretation.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You're prioritizing a sterile definitional precision over the actual emotional resonance of human communication.
I wouldn't call clarity sterile. It is functional.
But it can feel deeply clinical. Let's look at how we discuss arriving at that workplace. The precise, formal definition would lead you to say, I arrive at the office at 9 a.m.
Which is technically perfect.
Technically perfect. But if you use the phrase get to, as in I get to the office at 9 a.m., it instantly makes the speech sound warmer. It is friendlier and infinitely more natural.
Warmer, maybe. But is get to truly better than arrive?
Absolutely. Because I get to the office signals a casual comfort with the routine. It removes the rigidity.
I am still not seeing how comfort beats precision.
Let's look at another example then. How we talk about finishing tasks. You could use the precise, sterile verb and say, I am going to finish this project. Or you could use the phrasal verb, wrap up. I'm going to wrap up this project.
Well, wrap up is certainly a common idiom.
It is common because it is incredibly vivid. Wrap up illustrates a physical action. It evokes the feeling of putting the finishing touches on something, organizing your desk, closing your laptop.
It is descriptive. I'll give you that.
It has an energetic reality to it that the clinical verb finish completely lacks. True fluency prioritizes this emotional warmth. If you sound like a textbook, you may be precise, but you are failing to navigate the social reality of the language.
All right, let's examine that concept of emotional warmth against the necessity of structural logic. You praise the phrase wrap up for its vivid illustration of closing a laptop and organizing a desk.
I do.
And I can see that it is a colorful, highly effective idiom. However, the utility of wrap-up is entirely dependent on the structural context in which it is placed.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning that if a speaker cannot smoothly transition from their afternoon meetings into the final phase of the day using appropriate sequencing, the sudden insertion of an idiom like wrap-up feels jarring.
Jarring? How?
It's like putting a beautiful piece of modern furniture into a house where the floorboards are caving in. You have to map out the chronology of the day. You have the morning chaos, the commute, the noon lunch break, the afternoon focus, and finally the end of the workday.
Right.
That progression relies entirely on temporal connective tissue. You cannot effectively wrap up a narrative that was never structurally bound together in the first place.
Honestly, I think you are overestimating how much narrative structure a casual conversation actually requires.
And I think you are underestimating how quickly a listener gets lost without a timeline. The warmth of the phrasing is a luxury. It is the interior design of the house, and it can only be afforded once the structural engineering of the sentence is secure.
I come at it from a completely different way. I would argue that the warmth of the phrasing is not a luxury at all. It is the primary goal of interpersonal communication.
The primary goal?
Yes. Let's look closely at the social dynamics of leaving work. You can say, I am leaving the premises to return to my residence.
Oh, come on, which no one would actually say.
Exactly, because it sounds like a suspect reading a statement in a police report. Even, I am leaving work feels a bit cold. It is just a statement of changing physical coordinates.
So what is the alternative?
When someone says, I'm going to head home, what happens psychologically?
Well, they are stating their destination.
They are doing so much more than that. They are signaling to their listener that they understand the emotional weight of returning to their sanctuary after a long day of work.
That is a lot of meaning for 2 words.
But it's true. Heading home implies comfort. It tells the listener that the professional persona is turning off, which subconsciously invites the listener to relax as well. They are participating in a shared cultural understanding.
I see your point about the cultural layer.
If a speaker perfectly conjugates all their verbs and uses flawless word glue, but relies on rigid clinical vocabulary, they have successfully transmitted data, but they have failed to communicate humanity. The colloquial phrasing is the bridge between two minds.
Well, that is a beautiful sentiment, but consider the intense cognitive load required to master those macro phrases and idioms. The English language is notoriously saturated with phrasal verbs that completely lack intuitive logic to an outside observer.
I wouldn't say they lack logic. They aren't illogical, they are just culturally specific.
But they require rote memorization. Think about it. Wrap up, head home, catch up. These are seemingly arbitrary word pairings.
Arbitrary to a beginner, maybe.
Why does wrapping something mean finishing it? Why are we catching up to a coworker over coffee? To a language learner, these require massive mental effort to memorize individually.
And grammar rules don't?
A structural framework operates on consistent mathematical logic. Once a learner understands the rule that specific past events require the past tense, shifting from wake to woke or drink to drank, they possess a universal key.
It is a key, sure.
That single rule unlocks thousands of verbs. Once they understand the sequential logic of First, then, after that, they can organize any set of data regardless of the topic. Structural mechanics provide a reliable, scalable system for expression.
I disagree that idioms are just a burden of memorization. You view phrasal verbs as arbitrary homework. I view them as ultimate cognitive shortcuts.
Wait, how is memorizing 100 unique idioms a shortcut?
Because of what happens during the actual conversation. Yes, learning getting ready requires acquiring a new chunk of language initially. But once it is acquired, it vastly reduces the mental processing power required in the moment of speech.
I suppose it saves you from listing everything.
Exactly. Let's go back to our morning routine. If you rely on structure, your brain has to simultaneously translate and conjugate 5 separate verbs. You are brushing, washing, changing, packing, leaving, all while remembering your transition words.
It takes practice, certainly.
It takes immense mental bandwidth. But if you deploy one comprehensive phrase, I was getting ready, you bypass all of that computation. It frees up your mental bandwidth to focus on the interpersonal aspects of the conversation. You can focus on your tone, your pacing, reading the other person's facial expressions, establishing that emotional connection. You aren't bogged down in structural mathematics. You are effortlessly exchanging macro concepts.
I appreciate your focus on the effortless exchange of concepts. I mean, that flow state is what everyone striving for fluency wants to reach.
Right? It's the ultimate goal.
But we must acknowledge that achieving that state of effortlessness usually requires a rigorous understanding of the underlying mechanics first. You have to know the rules before you can successfully take the shortcuts.
Or perhaps the shortcuts are how you naturally absorb the rules over time, just like children do. They learn the chunks of sound before they ever understand the grammar.
That is a fascinating way to frame it. Let's synthesize our perspectives as we review the fundamental tensions we've explored today.
Sounds good.
I have maintained throughout this discussion that logical structure, grammatical precision, and connective tissue are the non-negotiable bedrock of clear communication.
The architectural skeleton.
Yes. Whether it is shifting from the present to the past tense to accurately convey reality, or utilizing word glue like first and then to guide the listener chronologically, the structural engineering is what prevents catastrophic breakdowns in understanding.
And you highlighted professional environments, too.
Right. I believe that precision, utilizing definitive terms like commute, ensures that our meaning remains intact regardless of the listener's background.
And I have demonstrated that while that structure is undeniably present, it is the colloquial macrophrases and idioms that provide the true warmth, efficiency, and native-like quality of speech.
The furnished rooms, as we called them.
Exactly. From the all-encompassing utility of getting ready, which saves us from exhausting lists, to the vivid kinetic energy of gulping it down, to the profound emotional comfort of heading home.
It is a strong counterpoint.
Language is ultimately a tool for human connection. Relying too heavily on sequential lists and sterile verbs produces robotic communication. Embracing the culturally resonant phrases allows a speaker to convey not just the raw facts of their day, but the felt human experience of it.
Well, despite our different frameworks, it is abundantly clear that we completely converge on the ultimate goal.
Definitely.
We are both trying to move beyond chopped-up mechanical lists to achieve smooth, natural descriptions of daily life. We both recognize that sounding like a robot, simply outputting isolated data points, is the absolute antithesis of fluency.
Absolutely. No one wants to talk to a robot.
No, they don't.
Whether one relies more heavily on the temporal transitions to map out the timeline or on the broad macro phrases to condense the information into digestible feelings, the shared objective is a seamless narrative flow. We both want the listener to be engaged, not exhausted.
Indeed. Understanding both the structural glue that binds a narrative together and the emotional warmth of phrasal verbs provides a much more complete and sophisticated picture of language acquisition.
It is a balance.
It is. It leaves us to consider our own communication once again. When you construct your own linguistic house, do you find yourself focusing more intensely on the rigid logical strength of the steel skeleton or on the welcoming, lived-in warmth of the furnished rooms?
It is a question every speaker must navigate as they build their own unique voice.
It certainly is. Thank you for joining us as we unpack these mechanics today.